As it turns out, you do not need a lot of arguments to prove that free will is an illusion. In fact, Sam Harris did it in this tiny book that is very disturbing, but he brings very compelling arguments on why free will is an illusion. It is a fake idea, it is a weird idea that we all believed at some point. Most of us still do. Most of us do not even consider that free will is not a thing. And in this book, he sets out to destroy this idea. So, what are his main arguments? Well, we must start on thinking about what free will is. If you believe in free will, you have some assumptions. And those are basically that each of us could have behaved differently than we did in the past, and also that we are the conscious source of most of our thoughts and actions in the present. And as Sam Harris says, we are about to see those two assumptions are false. First of all, what is the origin of our ideas, our actions, of our will? We cannot say that we actually generate our actions and our thoughts. Rather, they appear in our conscious mind. But research says, and Sam Harris has a lot of research that he cites, that research says that that information, that will, they appear in our unconscious mind, and that is detectable by devices. They can detect certain neurons firing before we actually decide to choose something or to act. So there are a lot of research that does exactly that. People are instructed to press a button the moment that they decide on choosing a word or something, or the moment when they decide to act, they must do something to let the researchers know, okay, this is conscious, I am consciously deciding to do this. But some research actually can detect that conscious action appearing in some neurons a full 10 seconds before the subject actually presses the button. So we're not talking about milliseconds. Most experiments can detect it milliseconds before it happens, but some could detect 7 to 10 seconds before. So it's hard to say that our conscious and our thoughts and actions, it's hard to say that they originate in the conscious mind, because there are a lot of neurons related to unconscious movement, unconscious processes in the mind that are already firing before we decide to do something. So still, we can ask, what is the origin of all that? We cannot say that we have a self that is controlling this. There's no evidence of that. And what would that even look like? Maybe some thoughts and actions would originate in the prefrontal cortex part of the brain, maybe, but they don't. And even so, a thought is no more than electrical and chemical reactions in the brain. So if we believe the world works according to certain laws of physics and laws of chemistry and laws of biology and everything like that, if we believe that, then it is logical that every thought that is an electrical impulse and a chemical reaction, it comes from things that happen before it. It's a reaction to a reaction to a reaction to a reaction, and so on and so forth to the beginning of the universe. If we believe we live in a physical universe and things happen because of what happened before. So where is the free will in that? If your synapses are just a reflection of what happened before and before and before, even before we were born, there's no free will in that. But there's another way of looking at things, and we can talk about quantum mechanics, for instance, where we cannot predict what matter will do next. We do not know what an electron will do, where it will be, so we cannot predict what reactions will happen. But you see that we still are in the field of things that happen without our input, our self, our higher self or something like that, giving an input. Just a random reaction that originates then a chain of electrical reactions and chemical reactions that become a thought and an action. So there's no free will in that as well. Now, one thing that I thought about, Sam Harris doesn't talk about, and it's more of a metaphysical, maybe even religious view of it, is that how would it look like if there's actually like a soul or something like that that a lot of people believe in, and that soul is the actual seat of ourselves, of our higher selves, that is controlling our actions and thoughts. We will not be able to see that soul in researching neuroscience, in machines and stuff like that. It's metaphysical, right? By definition, it's kind of cheating, but it would work like that. So maybe we could see the actions of that soul in our brain, in our physical brains, through those random reactions. Our soul would decide something and then sprinkle some magic dust in our brains, some quantum magic dust, and that would generate the reactions, the random reactions that end up making us act and think in a definite way. But like I said, this is a metaphysical view of things, and I don't care if you believe in that or not, but we're talking about logic and science. And if you think logically, free will is just a very complicated way of saying that something is out of our control. Something doesn't exist. Like, if we use the idea of Occam's razor, free will is like God. It's a very complicated explanation for things that are easily explicated away in some other way. In the case of our brains, it is simply that we have a lot of reactions and synapses going on, and semi-random thoughts and actions surface in our brain, and we cannot control it. So here's another very provocative thought in the book. Can you be responsible for not taking an action that it didn't come up in your head, in your mind, in the first place? For instance, I chose to wear this shirt for this video. I could have worn any other shirt, but the thought didn't even cross my mind. So is that free will? When you can act in a number of ways, but you are not even aware of those ways? That doesn't sound like free will to me. It sounds like accidents or random things. And why am I choosing these specific words? I cannot say. I am expressing myself, I am taking action, but I cannot say that I considered every word that I know before speaking them. So you see how free will is a concept that is very fragile, and it's hard to defend. And we can get some quotes directly from the book. And here's one related to that. Am I free to do that which does not occur to me to do? Of course not. And there is no way I can influence my desires. For what tools of influence would I use? Other desires? So it's hard to judge our desires if we cannot control that they exist. For instance, when we see a very obese person, it's easy to judge them by our standards because I do not binge eat like 6 whole pizzas. But maybe to that person, that is not a choice. Maybe whatever happened in their brain through biology or their history makes it extremely hard to fight that desire or to come up with other desires to fight that. So you see that it's even hard to judge other people because we do not know how their desires work, how their brain works. We can only judge them by our standards, which is a bit unfair. Here are some other quotes from the book. From the perspective of your conscious awareness, you are no more responsible for the next thing you think and therefore do. You are for the fact that you were born in this world. So again, we come to that idea that we cannot be responsible for the thoughts that come up in our heads. Otherwise, we would not know what is to forget something, to do something by mistake. We do that all the time because we are not responsible for the thoughts that arise. We can train ourselves, we can try to get better habits, but in the end, we cannot make sure that the right thoughts and therefore the right actions will come to our minds. And that's a bit scary. And we come to the question of, if there's no free will, can we judge someone, like in the practical sense? Can we judge like a criminal? Can we put someone away? And the fact is, we can do that, and we should. And as Sam Harris says, if we could arrest an earthquake, we would. Not because we are trying to punish that person for their choices, but because we are trying to make society safer. So not believing in free will actually makes you more merciful, and it takes the anger of judgment, because we cannot judge why the person chose to act that way, because they didn't choose at all. But we can choose what to do in the most efficient and humane way. So if we see someone is a psychopath, we're going to arrest him, and we're going to do whatever it takes to keep society safe. But we don't need to be angry or to think about sin and act upon those things. We can act upon rationality. And sin is a very interesting concept because it depends entirely on the notion of free will. But if you don't believe in free will, then sin does not exist. So we actually live in a world without sin. It's just random things that happen and the way we choose to deal with that. Now, I think the idea of no free will is great, but research has shown that when people confront that idea, most people act a little more like the future doesn't matter. Research shows that. And it's easy to understand why, because if we don't believe in free will, it's easy to be nihilistic. Like, I don't have a choice anyway, so why care about anything? But the thing is, we cannot choose to care or not care. We cannot choose what our reaction will be. But interestingly enough, it feels like we have a choice. It feels like we can make an effort to do one thing over another. So maybe free will does not exist and we cannot ultimately choose what we do, but it is helpful to try to act and try to think in more efficient ways and not think about sin and not think about oneself as hopeless, but try to do the best possible to cultivate good habits, to cultivate good thoughts, and to train ourselves so that we don't depend on our choices or our will to act, but we depend more and more on habits and more on things that are more automatic to us. Can we choose to do that? Can we desire that? Probably not. But if you're watching a video like this, you probably already have an inclination to do things that make you a better person, a more effective person, a more rational person. And we can still do that and pursue that and choose, at least in our illusions, we can choose to make more effort to be a better person. It doesn't matter if free will exists or not, as long as we keep being better and we use that idea to lead a better life in this world. And like I said, if we can live without sin, without judgment, how better would your life be? So don't get too attached to the illusion of free will. This is a really good book, a very short but compelling read, and I highly recommend it. And look for free will, look for the origin of your thoughts, and your idea on the subject may change faster than you think.